people pleasing is a sneaky habit. On the surface, it looks like kindness, generosity, and being easy to get along with. But underneath, it often hides fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough. Many of us start people pleasing early in life as a survival strategy. We figure out that if we make others happy, keep the peace, or meet expectations, we get approval. And approval feels like love. But over time, people pleasing becomes a prison. You start to lose your voice, your identity, and your joy because you're always living for other people's comfort rather than your own truth. The question is, what happens when you stop? When you finally decide to say no without explaining yourself, when you stop chasing approval, when you dare to disappoint others for the sake of your own integrity, what changes? Today, I want to walk you through the deep, often surprising transformations that happen when you break free from the need to please. And I'll be honest, it's not all sunshine and instant liberation. There's discomfort, there's loss, but there's also a powerful sense of freedom and self-worth waiting for you on the other side. When you stop people pleasing, one of the first and most profound shifts you'll notice is that your own voice becomes clearer and louder. For years, you might have swallowed your opinions, softened your words, or even told small lies to keep others comfortable. You might have agreed to things you didn't believe in just to avoid conflict or to be liked. Over time, that constant self-editing makes you forget what you actually think. The moment you start to step back from this pattern, there's a strange silence at first. It's almost like your inner voice is shy, unsure if it's allowed to speak up. You might find yourself second guessing, is it okay for me to say that? Or am I being too much? This is normal. You've trained yourself to filter your truth for so long that speaking honestly feels risky, maybe even dangerous. But here's the thing, the more you practice speaking from your heart, the stronger that voice becomes. You start small. You might say, we think of it, I actually don't agree with that, or that doesn't work for me. You notice the world doesn't fall apart when you tell the truth. And little by little, you learn that honesty, even if it's not always received perfectly, is far less exhausting than constant pretending. You also begin to trust yourself in a new way. People pleasing often creates self-doubt because you're always looking outward for the right answer. Now, you look inward, you pause and ask, what do I think? What do I want? What do I believe is right? That inner consultation builds self-respect. You stop living for applause and start living in alignment. Another thing you'll notice is that some people might be surprised, even uncomfortable, when you start speaking more directly. They've grown used to you being agreeable, but others will find it refreshing and respect you more. And here's the unexpected gift: the relationships that survive this shift will be stronger because they're built on truth, not performance. Your true voice isn't just about words, it's about values. It's about showing up in the world without disguising yourself to fit in. And once you hear that voice clearly, you won't want to go back to the muffled, edited version of you that people pleasing required. One of the most radical changes that happens when you stop people pleasing is that you start setting boundaries. And perhaps even more importantly, you keep them without apologizing or feeling like you've done something wrong. For a lifelong people pleaser, boundaries can feel like an act of rebellion. After all, you've likely spent years saying yes, by default, even when your gut screamed no. At first, the act of setting boundaries is deeply uncomfortable. You may have been taught that saying no is selfish or unkind. So when you finally decline an invitation, turn down extra work, or say you can't help with something, you may feel a pang of guilt. That inner voice whispering, you're letting them down, they'll think you're rude. But here's the truth: boundaries aren't walls to shut people out. They're doors that let the right people in. A boundary says, this is what's okay for me, and this is what's not. It's not about controlling others. It's about taking responsibility for your own well-being. And when you stop people pleasing, you realize that protecting your energy is not selfish, it's essential. In the early days, your boundaries might be shaky. You may set one, then backtrack the moment someone pushes back. This is normal. You're learning a skill you were never taught, and skills take practice. Over time, though, you get better at holding your ground, and something amazing happens. You stop needing to over-explain. Instead of giving a 5-minute speech about why you can't do something, you simply say, I'm not able to, and leave it at that. You'll also start to notice how boundaries actually strengthen relationships. When you're clear about what you can and can't give, there's less resentment. You no longer say yes out of obligation only to secretly wish you hadn't agreed. Instead, you say yes when you mean it, which makes your yes so much more valuable. Not everyone will like your new boundaries. Some people benefit from you having none. When you start enforcing them, those people may react with frustration or even distance themselves. And while that can hurt, it's also revealing. Boundaries tend to filter out relationships that were built on your compliance rather than mutual respect. The biggest win is that you stop sacrificing your mental, emotional, and physical health just to keep other people happy. You start making decisions from a place of self-respect rather than fear of disapproval. And over time, you'll notice that the guilt you felt at first begins to fade. What replaces it is a sense of calm, the knowledge that you can care for others without betraying yourself in the process. When you stop people pleasing, your relationships inevitably shift. And while that might sound scary, it's actually one of the most freeing outcomes. Here's why people pleasing often attracts relationships that are conditional, meaning the connection depends on you meeting certain unspoken expectations. You play a role, keep the peace, and say yes more often than you want to just to keep things smooth. The problem, that version of connection isn't real. It's transactional. And deep down, you know it, because you've probably felt the fear that if you stop being so agreeable, the relationship will suffer. And sometimes it will. When you start showing up as your true self, some relationships will fade. This can be painful, especially if you've invested years of emotional labor in them. You might wonder, was the connection real, or was it just my constant effort holding it together? That's a hard truth to face, but it's also clarifying. What's left after this shift is gold. Authentic relationships don't require you to shrink, pretend, or hide parts of yourself. They can handle disagreement, conflict, and even disappointment without falling apart. In fact, these moments of honesty often deepen the bond because they're built on trust, not performance. You'll start noticing subtle but powerful differences. For example, you no longer feel drained after spending time with certain people. You're not constantly monitoring your words or trying to predict their reactions. You feel safe enough to be imperfect, to say, I can't today, or I don't see it that way. Without fear of punishment, this change also means you begin to attract different kinds of people. When you're no longer broadcasting, I'll mold myself to keep you happy, you start sending out a different message. I value myself and I value honesty. People who appreciate that will come closer. Those who don't will naturally drift away. It's not always smooth sailing. Some relationships will go through a rocky adjustment period as people get used to the new you. But the ones worth keeping will adapt. And you'll find that fewer but deeper relationships are far more nourishing than a crowd of connections built on your compliance. One of the most surprising gifts of giving up people pleasing is how much time, energy, and mental clarity you get back. People pleasing is exhausting work. It's not just about saying yes. It's about constant emotional labor, reading the room, monitoring people's moods, predicting their needs, smoothing over tension, and adjusting yourself to fit what you think they want. When you step away from that role, you suddenly have hours and headspace you didn't know you were missing. You're no longer filling your schedule with commitments you resent. You're no longer lying awake, replaying conversations to make sure you didn't upset anyone. You're no longer running on the hamster wheel of do more, give more, be more agreeable just to earn your place. This extra space allows you to reconnect with yourself. You might find old passions resurfacing, hobbies, creative pursuits, or simple pleasures you abandoned because you were too busy helping everyone else. You might realize how tired you've been for years and finally give yourself permission to rest. The mental space is just as valuable. Without the constant background noise of worrying what others think, you can focus more deeply on your own goals. Decisions become simpler because you're making them based on what's right for you, not on a complicated calculation of who will approve. There's also a physical benefit. Chronic people pleasing keeps your body in a state of low grade stress. We think of it as always scanning for approval or signs of disapproval. When you stop, your nervous system gets a break. You may notice you're less tense, you breathe easier, and you even sleep better. Over time, this shift changes how you experience your days. Instead of being on autopilot, rushing from one obligation to another, you start living intentionally. You choose your yes and your no with care, and that intentionality makes your life feel more yours, not something you're renting out to everyone else's needs. The most profound transformation that happens when you stop people pleasing is internal. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people's opinions. For years, you may have relied on praise, gratitude, or approval to feel like you mattered. Without realizing it, you put your confidence on unstable ground because people's approval can change overnight. When you stop chasing it, you're forced to find a new foundation. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, even empty. You might ask yourself, if I'm not the helpful one, the agreeable one, the one who always says, yes, who am I? That question can be unsettling, but it's also the doorway to genuine self worth. You begin to realize that you have value simply because you exist, not because you're doing giving or accommodating. You learn to validate yourself, to acknowledge your own needs and achievements without waiting for someone else to notice. This kind of confidence is quieter than the kind built on external praise, but it's far more stable. It allows you to take risks, to express yourself, and to pursue goals that matter to you, even if not everyone understands or approves. You stop living for applause and start living for alignment. Importantly, letting go of people pleasing doesn't mean you stop caring about others. You still show kindness, empathy, and generosity. But now it comes from a place of choice, not fear. You help because you want to, not because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. That distinction changes everything. And over time, you find that people respect you more when you respect yourself. You become a model for healthy self-worth, showing that it's possible to be compassionate without being a doormat. Conclusion, stopping people pleasing is not about swinging to the other extreme and becoming cold or selfish. It's about learning to honor your needs and values while still being compassionate. It's about living in integrity, even when it means disappointing someone. Yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Yes, you may lose some connections, but what you gain, your voice, your boundaries, your authentic relationships, your energy, and your self-worth is worth everything. As Brené Brown says, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. And when you stop people pleasing, you give yourself the gift of finally living as the person you truly are.